I became blind after the explosion. But I did not break down, I learned to paint darkness. My paintings make people hear the light and touch the pain. My name is Jake Donnelly. And before everything went dark, I saw the world in terrifying, brilliant detail. I was a combat engineer. Third tour, Afghanistan. My job wasn't glory or gunning down enemies, it was dirt and wire and crawling on my belly to disarm what most men ran from. Mines. I'd cleared 37 when the war decided to paint my world black. It was spring. The sun was punishing the valley, but the sky was this clean, innocent blue, like the world forgot it was bleeding. We were moving through a village on the outskirts of Kandahar. I remember the smell, burned rubber, diesel, and bread rising in an outdoor oven. There was a lull in the mission, that deceptive quiet that makes you think maybe today, you'll live. That's when I saw him. A boy, 8, maybe 9, standing alone in a collapsed alley. Dust streaked his face, and his eyes. God, his eyes. They were wide, wet, full of a fear I recognized in my bones. He wasn't supposed to be there. I don't remember making the decision. My boots moved before my brain caught up. I radioed a warning, but the words barely left my mouth when I stepped forward. And then, I disappeared. There's no sound I can compare to it. Not thunder. Not bombs. It wasn't even a sound. It was a silence so complete it felt like I'd been ripped out of the world. The ground vanished under me. Heat swallowed me. Then pain. I woke up a week later in a military hospital in Germany. Morphine blurred the ceiling. My legs were still there, somehow. But my eyes. I knew before anyone said it. My world was a void. No shadow, no light. Just, nothing. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst was hearing a nurse say, his wife's flying in tomorrow. And realizing I'd never see her face again. Samantha. My Sam. Her freckles, the way she'd bite her lip when she was thinking, how her eyes smiled before her lips did. All of it, gone. Erased. I lay there for hours pretending to sleep when she walked in. I could feel her presence like a ghost brushing past. She held my hand. She didn't cry. She didn't say much at all. Just squeezed my fingers and whispered, "You're still my Jake." But she was wrong. Because the Jake who knew the shape of sunlight, the color of her laugh, the way the morning looked from our kitchen window, he died in that alley beside a scared little boy. And the man who woke up blind? I didn't know who he was yet. But he wasn't someone I wanted to be. After the blast, they flew me back to the States like a broken parcel, fragile, labeled, handled with care. But there was nothing careful about the way I hit the ground when I got home. I stayed at Walter Reed for 4 months. Rehab, reconditioning, relearning how to tie my boots and drink from a cup without knocking it over. They called it recovery, like I'd left something behind and just needed to walk back to it. But I knew better. What I lost wasn't just sight. It was identity. The soldier. The husband. The man. The world moved around me like a movie I couldn't watch anymore. People spoke slower, louder, like I was dumb, not blind. I'd hear doctors describe my progress as if I wasn't sitting 3 feet away. He's adjusting, slowly. My own wife would correct them, gently, his name is Jake. I appreciated it. But even she didn't get it. I'd sit in bed, still as stone, listening to the TV playing reruns of shows I used to love. Now, I couldn't even follow the plots. Voices overlapped. Laughter tracks mocked me. The silence afterward was worse. When I finally came home, to our house in Virginia, it felt like stepping into someone else's life. Sam had rearranged everything so I wouldn't trip. Furniture pushed to the edges, labels in braille on the cabinets, beeping devices for everything from the microwave to the toothbrush. It was thoughtful. And unbearable. I missed stubbing my toe. I missed knowing the stupid coffee table was where it wasn't supposed to be because I was the one who left it there. Now it was all sterile, predictable, silent. Sam tried. God, she tried. She'd narrate sunsets to me like poetry, describe what she was wearing when we went out, blue dress, the one with the tiny white dots you used to like. And I'd smile and nod and pretend. But inside I was screaming. Because I remembered that dress. I remembered how it danced around her legs when she twirled barefoot on our porch. And now, all I had was a ghost of it. A memory that slipped further away each day. The hardest nights were the quiet ones. She'd lie beside me, her breathing soft and steady. I'd reach for her face, trace it with my fingers like a blind man reading scripture. And I'd wonder, what if she's crying? What if she's not even looking at me? What if she's already gone in her mind? Then, one night, I found her in the kitchen, staring out the window. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but she was whispering on the phone. Her voice was low, raw. I missed the way he looked at me. I missed the way he used to laugh at my dumb stories. He doesn't laugh anymore. I didn't say anything. I just turned and walked back to bed. My cane tapped the hardwood like a metronome marking time I couldn't get back. 2 weeks later, she packed a weekend bag. I didn't ask where she was going. When she came back, her voice was different, lighter, distracted. We went through the motions. Meals. Conversations. The shell of a marriage. The final blow came on a Tuesday morning. We were sitting at breakfast. I spilled orange juice, and the glass shattered. I cursed and slammed my hand on the table. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just whispered, "I missed the old Jake." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because the truth was, so did I. She left 6 months after I came home. There was no fight. No drama. Just a note on the counter and her wedding ring beside it. I held it in my hand for an hour, running my thumb over the band like it might hum with her heartbeat. I didn't try to stop her. How could I? I couldn't even look her in the eye to apologize. After that, I stopped answering calls. My family tried for a while, then gave up. I stopped shaving. Stopped showering some days. I drank too much, slept too little. I broke things just to hear the sound. I'd sit in the dark, where it didn't matter if the lights were on or not, and think about that alley. About the moment before the blast. I'd replay it like a sick lullaby. I'd think, if I had taken one step to the left. If I'd hesitated. If I'd let the boy die. Would she still be here? Would I still be me? People say grief comes in stages. But what they don't say is that blindness makes time meaningless. There were no stages. Just days I wanted to die and nights I begged the silence to take me. The VA offered therapy. Support groups. Pills. I said no to all of it. I didn't want help. I wanted out. But one night, I found myself on a bridge, gripping the rusted rail, listening to the river below. The current was fast. I could hear the water hitting rocks. It sounded clean. Final. And then, behind me, a voice. Calm. Curious. Not alarmed. You ever think about what the river sees? I turned. I didn't recognize the man, but he smelled like paint thinner and wore a coat speckled with color. He chuckled, like he'd read my mind. We don't die when we lose our eyes. We die when we stop telling the truth. I didn't know it then, but that stranger was about to change everything. I didn't jump. Not because I had a revelation or saw a light, nothing dramatic like that. I just stood there, gripping the bridge rail, stunned by that voice and the strange calm it carried. And in that pause, that breath of hesitation, the man walked closer. No fear in his steps. No judgment in his tone. "Marshall," he said, like we were already friends. "You looked like a guy standing between endings." I said nothing. Didn't have to. He already knew. He didn't tell me not to do it. Didn't say it would get better. He just asked me a question so absurd, so out of place, it snapped something loose in me. "You ever try painting?" I almost laughed. "I'm blind," I said, my voice cracked and hollow, like it hadn't been used in weeks. "In case you missed that detail." He just nodded. "Even better." That's how it started. Turns out, Marshall was an art therapist at a community center downtown. Used to be a sculptor until he lost 3 fingers in a car accident. Now he worked with vets, trauma survivors, addicts, people with more pain than language. The next morning, I followed the address he gave me. Took 2 buses and almost got lost twice. The receptionist had to walk me to the studio. She smelled like peppermint gum and wore bangles that jingled with every step. The room smelled like turpentine, wet paper, and old hope. There were no windows, but I could feel how wide it was by the echo of our footsteps. Canvas frames lined the walls like silent sentinels. Someone was playing jazz through a cheap speaker in the corner, low and moody, like the music was apologizing for being there. Marshall greeted me with that same easy voice, handed me a smock, and said, "We paint with what's left." I wanted to scoff. To walk out. But something in me, it wasn't curiosity, not yet, but maybe the ghost of it, kept me rooted. He led me to a blank canvas, handed me a brush, and said, "You don't need eyes to tell the truth. You need pain. And honesty. And hands willing to speak." I held that brush like it was a foreign object. I dipped it into paint I couldn't see, spread color I couldn't name. And for the first time in over a year, I didn't try to control the outcome. I just felt. What came out was chaos. Angry smears. Jagged edges. Thick ridges where I pressed too hard. My fingers got messy, smeared paint where it didn't belong. I knocked the water cup over. Didn't care. When I finished, if you could call it that, my shirt was stained, my hands were shaking, and my throat ached from holding back tears. Marshall didn't critique. He just stood beside me in silence. Then he said the thing that cracked my armor wide open. "Most people use art to show the world what they see. But you just showed me what you feel. And that's braver than anything I've seen with my eyes." I didn't answer. Couldn't. But when I left that day, I took the brush with me. Just held it in my pocket like a secret. Because for the first time in a year, I felt something shift inside me, something I hadn't felt since the blast. I felt seen. I became obsessed. It started small. I'd dip my fingers into leftover paints at the community center and try to guess the colors by texture. Red felt thicker, heavier somehow. Blue was slicker, like it wanted to disappear. Yellow, if I focused hard enough, felt like heat, maybe from the light bulbs above or maybe from memory. I wasn't sure. Marshall noticed. He started giving me strange assignments. Paint what it feels like to stand in a thunderstorm. Show me the color of forgiveness. Make me taste fear. He never cared if the result looked good. He wasn't trying to make me an artist. He was teaching me how to see differently. To paint from memory, from sensation, from sound and touch and the places pain lived inside my chest. He'd bring in objects for me to hold before painting. Crushed leaves. Cold metal. Feathers. He taught me how light bends and shadows stretch, not with diagrams, but with descriptions that landed in my bones. "Light has temperature," he said once. "It wraps around things. It doesn't just fall. It clings." I started noticing the world in layers. Sound gave me space. The way footsteps echoed told me the shape of a room. The hum of an old fridge hinted at linoleum floors. People's voices weren't just voices anymore, they were brushstrokes, pressure, rhythm. I painted every day. Sometimes at the studio. Sometimes at the shelter, hunched over a canvas balanced on milk crates. I stopped caring what people thought. I stopped waiting for my life to start again. Because somewhere in the mess of paint and noise, I realized, this was my life now. And it didn't have to be less. One afternoon, Marshall brought in a local gallery owner. She walked the room slowly, pausing at each piece. I couldn't see her, but I could feel her silence, tight, contemplative. She stopped in front of one of mine. I called it static. It was a chaotic mess of lines and textures, punctuated by tiny, smooth dots where I'd pressed marbles into wet paint. She didn't speak for almost 2 minutes. Then she said, this feels like grief caught in motion. That night, Marshall told me she wanted to feature my work in a group exhibition. I laughed. Thought he was joking. I'm blind, I said. Who wants to hang chaos on a wall? He didn't laugh back. You paint like you've seen fire burn through silence, he said. People need that. They need to feel something again. That show opened in Portland 6 weeks later. I didn't go for the crowd or the praise. I went because I needed to prove to myself that I could still exist in the world. Not as a ghost. Not as a broken soldier. But as something else. People touched my work. Some cried. A few asked to meet me. One art critic later wrote, Jake Donnelly paints like he's seen the soul of fire. When Marshall read that to me, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Because the truth was, I hadn't seen anything. Not in years. But maybe, just maybe, I was learning to see differently. His name was Caleb. 10 years old, maybe 11, with soft sneakers and a way of walking like he was always counting steps. His mother brought him to my Portland exhibit on the final weekend. She held his hand like it was something sacred. He's blind, she said gently, her voice edged with caution. But he wanted to touch the paintings. I told her he didn't need permission. That's why they were there, mounted low, edges softened, textures raised like topography maps of emotion. I'd fought the gallery for weeks to let people experience the work with their hands. Not everyone sees with their eyes. She guided him to a canvas titled Pulse. It was made of heavy, looping ridges, paint poured thick like blood then cut into by combs, forks, even the blunt edge of a broken record. Beneath that, I'd sewn strips of rough canvas that rasped under fingers, like old skin healing badly. Caleb placed his palms on it and stilled. He wore noise-canceling headphones, but even through them, I could hear the small gasp that left his throat. Then, he whispered something. I hear colors when I touch this. No one else heard it. Just me. He turned his face toward mine, eyes clouded, but somehow focused, and said louder, this one sounds like thunder and orange juice. I choked out a laugh. Not at him. With him. Because I knew exactly what he meant. I reached forward and touched the edge of the painting with him. Yeah, I said, my voice catching. That's what I was going for. His mom started crying then. Quietly, the way you cry when you're afraid happiness might break if you hold it too tightly. She told me he hadn't spoken to a stranger in months. That his school said he had connection issues. But here he was, describing the sound of a painting to a man he'd never met. When they left, she hugged me. Thank you for giving him something to hold on to, she said. I couldn't speak. My throat was full of gravel and light. That night, I didn't go home. I wandered through downtown Portland with my cane tapping the sidewalk like a heartbeat, the city buzzing low and alive around me. And then, somewhere between 9th and Burnside, I broke. I sobbed. In the open. On a bench that smelled like old rain and cigarettes. I cried for that boy. For myself. For the years I thought I was useless. Because suddenly, I wasn't. I wasn't a broken soldier or a burden or a ghost in my own story. I was an artist. And someone, had just heard thunder and orange juice in my work. That night changed everything. That was the night I realized my pain had purpose. That maybe, just maybe, my blindness was the beginning of something beautiful. After Portland, I started saying yes more. Yes to interviews, to school visits, to late-night podcast calls where hosts asked how a blind man learned to paint the way silence feels when it rains. I never had good answers. Just stories. Just scars. But somehow, people leaned in. And then came the invitations. Not from critics or collectors, but from strangers. One of the first was a teenager named Nova. She messaged me through the community center's page. Said she'd lost her sight at 17 from a rare degenerative condition. Said she missed music the way some people miss the moon, distant, unreachable, still burning inside her. But then she found her way back. Through bass. I met her in a warehouse in East LA. She was 17, standing behind a DJ table, hands dancing over sliders and knobs like a magician. The music shook the walls, the floor, the ribs in my chest. And I swear, I could feel her smile in the rhythm. Nova spun tracks not for ears, but for skin. Deep, physical sound that thumped into your bones and bloomed there. She called it tactile mixing. When I asked how she did it, she laughed. I don't hear songs, she said. I feel them. Like you paint them. I told her about Pulse, and her mouth dropped open. That's what my first seizure felt like, she said. Like being inside your painting. We swapped stories like soldiers swapping war wounds. Different battles, same ache. Then came Avery. A single mom in Chicago. 2 boys, both under 10. Born blind, never once seen their faces. I met her at a community event where I was speaking about adaptive art. Afterward, she came up, her voice soft but steady. I don't paint. I dance. She invited me to her studio the next day. I watched, or rather, listened, as her feet told stories across polished wood. She moved with precision, like the floor was her partner, every step a whisper of memory and music. Her boys sat on the sidelines, tapping along to the rhythm with toy drums. One of them ran up to me and asked if I wanted to dance. I laughed, stumbled, and almost fell. But in that moment, I realized something. None of us were broken. We were just tuned differently. Then there was Harold. Vietnam vet. Blinded by a grenade in '71. He taught ballroom dance to sighted kids in Texas, using only touch and voice commands. I don't need to see them to know when they're off beat, he told me. You can hear hesitation. Smell fear. Feel joy. These weren't headlines. No 6 o'clock news story would cover a blind DJ spinning under warehouse lights, or a mother teaching her twins to follow her breath across a dance floor. But to me, they were everything. They were proof that we weren't defined by what we'd lost. We were creators. Storytellers. Alchemists of the unseen. I started painting with them in mind. Nova's beats, Avery's turns, Harold's steady rhythm. People started calling my work illusions. Paintings that seemed to hum. Gallery visitors said they could hear light, taste movement. One woman cried when she touched a piece called Weightless. I don't know why, she said, but this feels like my mother's hug. That's when it hit me. I wasn't painting pictures. I was painting echoes. The echoes of all the people who taught me how to see without sight. And with every canvas, I was telling their stories too. Today, I paint full-time. No fallback plan. No side hustle. Just me, a room full of silence, and the steady, patient movement of my hands across canvas. There's no clock in my studio. No windows either. Light means nothing to me now, so I measure time by music. 1 album is a warm-up. 2 is a sketch. 3, and I'm deep in the current, lost in texture, chasing the shape of something I'll never see but know in my marrow. I don't paint from reference photos. I paint from memory, from sensation. From grief, mostly. And awe. And sometimes, the soft ache of remembering the feel of my wife's freckles under my fingertips, or the sound of my mother's laugh when I told her I sold a painting to a museum. My fingers remember things my eyes forgot. They remember the hum of Afghanistan just before a blast. The shudder of a train pulling into D.C. The heartbeat of a boy who once heard colors. I use everything now, spoons, combs, broken guitar strings, the heel of my palm. Sometimes I stitch fabric into the canvas, or embed old coins and smooth stones. I want people to feel my work, not just observe it. I want them to touch sadness, hold it in their hands, and know it's theirs too. My gallery shows are different. Visitors wear headphones. No spotlights. No polite murmurs or wine flutes clinking. Just guided audio, me narrating what I painted and why. I don't describe what's there. I describe what isn't. The cold spaces. The tension. The echo of choices made too late. They listen. They cry sometimes. Not because my story is sad, but because it lives. Because they see themselves in it. People say I inspire them. That I'm a symbol of resilience, proof that the human spirit is indestructible. But that's not true. I'm still just that broken soldier who stepped on a mine one spring morning and woke up in darkness. The only difference is, I stopped trying to see what I'd lost. And started painting what I couldn't. I've made peace with the silence. With the black. It doesn't scare me anymore. Now, it's just part of the canvas. The negative space. The shadow that gives the color its meaning. I used to think blindness was the end of my story. Now I know better. Now, every painting whispers the truth I almost never got to tell. You're still here. And that's enough.